Okay, good morning. Let me get my slides up here. It was another incredible week, so we're going to jump right in. A lot of things that I want to talk about today. Let me just make a couple suggestions. A lot of us are, we talk each week about the convergence of events and all these things that seem to be happening all at the same time. Daniel Greenfield, who's one of the bloggers, authors, columnists that I really respect a lot, has a great article this week on his blog, Sultan Kanish. And in that blog, he talks about the race to censor internet news. And I'm bringing this up just because of what's been happening to me and a bunch of other people. We keep getting put in Facebook jail when we share things. And it's clearly designed to be a behavior modification thing. They never tell you why you were put in Facebook jail, just that you shared something that might not be appropriate. But they don't tell you why it's inappropriate, and it may be something that 1,000 other people have shared. And it happens more, I think, to political conservatives and Christians than anybody else. And Daniel makes a very good point in his blog post this week about the fact that, everybody wants to censor the news. So Steve Brill, who has a thing called American Lawyer Media, he used to have a thing many years ago called Counsel Connect. And it became very popular during the O.J. Simpson trial. And Terry, the guy who's on ABC News, one of their main correspondents now, there was a small group of us who used to get on there and comment about different things going on in the O.J. Simpson trial. Then we started having discussions about other topics, and then Steve Brill went off because he was smarter than the rest of us, and he made a lot of money making himself into sort of a bit of a media empire. And he wants to do the same thing with censoring internet news. He wants to make money off of censoring internet news, and he's going to make up this site he's going to have 40 to 60 journalists. Journalists used to write news, now they're going to censor news. It just shows how things have changed. So just let me suggest that with regard to the prophecy update that I do, and I know there's others that do them, J.D. Farag, Amir Sarfati, Jacob Prasch, if you could go to each of our YouTube channels and subscribe so you get automatic notification when we put them up, because I don't think it's too long until you're not going to be able to share these things without getting hammered for a week or so. But that doesn't mean you should stop, because if you stop, then Facebook is one, because they've censored the news, they've censored I hope this is good thinking, the things we present here. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow Fellowship Bible Chapel on Facebook. We also post the Columbus Bible Prophecy Conference. Follow that, like Fellowship Bible Chapel, and you'll get more regular. It'll help the message get out there a little bit better. Do things like also the Heim Report that Brian Schrager does at Jerusalem Journal. You could share that, because we want to get this information out there. Brian's thing is not offensive. He just, I've been put in Facebook jail for sharing it. I don't know. All of a sudden I'm in Facebook jail for a week, and I get paroled here in about an hour because I've been since last Sunday. It just knocked me off. And you appeal it, and they never communicate with you. These little fascists that run Facebook that want you to think a certain way. So I'm just saying, help ministries out by subscribing to their things, liking their channels, and that sort of thing. Thank you. Now I've got so much water. I can go for hours now because I've got all this water. So next week I'll come up here, there'll be a case of water under here. And let's just look at a few things that are going on. This sort of relates to Bible prophecy in the sense that Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 24 that as we get closer to the end, there'll be earthquakes and wars, rumors of wars, those type of things. And we see this through natural disasters. It seems that most natural disasters this now are preceded by something like unprecedented natural disasters, or a record floods, or we've never seen this before, that type of thing. By the way, guys, do we put up the URL for the new place where we're live streaming? Okay, and that's Church Stream. Well, you need to tell me what it is, and I'll announce it in case people don't see it on the slide. But we. YourStreamLive.com. FellowshipBibleChapel.YourStreamLive.com. And I think we're also still doing it on Facebook. And pray for the audio version, only version. Although if you know how to work it on YouTube, you can get just an audio version to download there. But there are these catastrophes, and these catastrophes keep getting preceded by, we've never seen this happen before, this is unprecedented, all-time record, or, they used to talk about a 100-year flood, now they're 500-year floods or 1,000-year floods. And it just seems like this is happening all over the world. There's an article in The Guardian, I don't even have a slide for it, I think it was just in The Guardian yesterday or today, out of London, talking about we should have some all-time record earthquakes coming up soon because the Earth's rotation is slowing down a little bit. Even though it's only by like a few milliseconds at most that it's slowing down. In the past when that's happened, we've had an increase in earthquakes that are above 7 or 7.5, and we appear to be entering another one of those cycles. But they've been measuring earthquakes for a while, and it does seem, at least everybody that follows it seems like there's more and more earthquakes. And there are more and more strong earthquakes that are happening. Volcanic eruptions happening. There's a volcano down near Mexico City, which is one of the largest cities on the planet, and it's been erupting off and on. And if it goes in a big way, it could be a major, major disaster. So just pay attention that these are just record payouts from insurance carriers, and that's going to have an impact on us. Now I'm going to talk about a few things that happened culturally this week, and I think they're all connected. In Australia, they had a nationwide referendum to vote yes or no. Should we have same-sex marriage or not? Yes, we should have it. Now, it's not binding on the legislature. They can still go and enact a law and do the right thing, but they're going to follow their constituents. And although in some cases they're not, I'll show you an interesting thing is some of the Liberal Party, the left-leaning party in Australia, they have really tried to help out the Muslim immigrants and Muslim people in Australia with political favors, laws, that sort of thing. And they're like, oh, you can't criticize Islam and that sort of thing. Well, now what happened was in the same-sex marriage vote, a lot of these people have heavily Muslim districts, these left-leaning people. But the Muslims don't like same-sex marriage, so they voted it down. Now, what do you think these liberal, left-leaning politicians are going to do when it comes time to vote on something in the legislature? Do you think they're going to go with what their constituents want, or do you think they're going to go with their left-leaning tendencies? They're going to go with their left-leaning tendencies because they have an agenda and they don't really care what people think. So 61%, 62% in Australia said yes to same-sex marriage. Now, what's happened is it's been covered extensively down there, you need to follow the language that's used when people talk about things like this. In fact, I mentioned to somebody, was messaging with Brian Schrager early this morning, and sort of like, how's it going? And I'm like, I want to scream, and so I sent Brian a text and I said, you need to watch the audio this morning in case I get a little bit fired up because it might hit up into that red zone a little bit. But you need to watch the language that these people are fascist. You need to understand that they want to control your thought. They want to change things. They don't care about freedom. They care about their leftist agenda. They care about tearing down society and culture and politics. That is what their agenda is. And look at it in the headline of the Australian. Look at what it says. In the middle part up here, a nation wedded to the future as the pains of the past are consigned to history. What are they saying? We've evolved, we've reached a higher plane, and we don't have to worry about all those stupid medieval things that people used to do. Because you're a Neanderthal if you think that way. So there are a lot of proposals in Australia about what they're going to do. Are parents going to have the same freedom to teach their children whether traditional marriage is right as opposed to same-sex marriage? And so there's a debate there. Now you know where the left is going to end up because they want to tear everything down. So, and then there's a question about what do we do about ministers? So here's one proposed bill endorsed by moderates, allows ministers in the middle, the second one down, allows ministers of religion to refuse to marry gay couples. Then the next proposal creates a new category of religious marriage, celebrants who can also refuse to marry gay couples, and allows religious bodies to decline facilities for same-sex weddings. Now, this is interesting too. This is a kind of a side and related thought. Facebook, I got put in Facebook jail. And the response of some people was, well, you must have violated the rules, and Facebook is a private company and they can do whatever they want. Except when it comes to somebody that they want to force to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. That person isn't allowed to do what they want. And why are my religious beliefs, my religious thoughts, my religious speech subject to discrimination by Facebook, which it is, clearly. In fact, I don't know why, and I'm just suggesting it, these people that are asked to photograph weddings or to bake cakes, if they're going to be forced to bake a cake, I think they ought to make a rule. I have one type of wedding cake that I do, and it has a male and female on the top, and it's laced with all the verses in the Bible, and God created man and woman, and a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the words of Jesus. And it comes with programs, and you have to pass those programs out if you want a cake for me. I'll bake you the cake, but I only make one kind of cake. And if I do photography at a wedding, I only do albums that are laced with Bible verses about this. Now, the reason for that is the procedure in the Supreme, or the arguments in the Supreme Court is, you're forcing me to create expressively, to speak in a certain way, which you're not allowed to do. I have freedom of speech, I have freedom not to speak, but you're forcing me to do this in a particular way. So if they're going to force you, then say, I only do it in a particular way. And let them litigate that. Let them be shown for the thought control, fascist thought police that they really are. That's just, there's no extra charge for that one. But the reason why, and you see these proposals, like here in the bottom right-hand corner, the Attorney General in Australia is saying an amendment to make it clear that nothing in the bill makes it unlawful for people to hold and to express the views of their own religion on the subject of marriage. Now, why would the Attorney General be doing that? Is he just crazy? No, there's a reason. He's been watching what's going on around the world and how people are being forced into these little boxes by these fascist thought police people. And he's saying we need to protect the conscientious thoughts, beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever, of people who don't agree with that. And show them to be the intolerant thought police that they are when they want to control that. And so the people in Australia are really wrestling with, how do we protect people's freedoms? Now, this is even bigger than you think. This was Monday this week. This is from The Independent in England. Church of England tells schools to let children explore gender identity. So what the Church of England has a bunch of schools in England, and they're all the. So this is what they came out with. This publication called the Church of England Education Office, Valuing All God's Children, Guidance for Church of England Schools on Challenging Homophobic, Biphobic, and Transphobic Bullying. Now, listen, do they ever go to, say, a madrasa school in a Muslim neighborhood and say, you shouldn't be bullying Christians with your thoughts? They don't do that. Here's what's happening here. The Church of England is just saying, we give up. We give up. The Bible isn't important to us. This is incredibly, and by the way, I found this. I saw the report that was on ITV. It's a television channel, I guess, in England, Great Britain, which hopefully, Lord willing, I'll be speaking there about a year from today, if I get in, I guess. I'm supposed to be there. It's like exactly 1 year from now. So I went to the Church of England website to find this, and it's gone from the website. But there is this wonderful little thing on the internet called archive.org, archive.org. I got the URL, typed it in, boom, I downloaded the thing. I think they're getting a lot of heat from this. And what they've done is it has in one of the appendices, it has a flow chart of actions. And then it has a equality policy template. It has forms and everything for people to fill out if they've seen somebody who's misgendered somebody. You haven't referred to them by the gender that they want to be referred to, even though if you look at them, you don't know. It's total insanity. And listen, where do you think the Church of England went to get at this? They went to a group called the Stonewall Project. Do you understand? Do you understand how significant this is? Okay, here's what we can say today. Whether there were any doubts, there shouldn't have been any doubts till now, the Church of England is officially apostate. If you want to know what apostate is and falling away from the truth of Scripture, here is Exhibit A in the case against the Church of England. Their own words and their own actions. They have all these resources, and they're all from pro-LGBTQ activist organizations. They even says this, this is what it says in the report, why do Church of England schools need special guidance beyond that offered to all schools? The God of all creation is concerned with everything related to education. The vision is deeply Christian with the promise of Jesus, of life in all its fullness. That is blasphemous. I just am shocked. Look at what they say. They have this section, Gender Identity Reassignment. It says, under the Equality Act, which says a person has the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. This is a law in England, in Great Britain. If the person is proposing to undergo, is undergoing, or has undergone a process, or part of a process, for the purpose of reassigning the person's sex by changing physiological or other attributes of sex. Okay. Science. You go into that operation a male, you come out of that operation as a male, or a female, you come out as a female. You might have had things cut off or things pasted on, but biologically, DNA-wise, you are still a male. Okay? You might be a male who could sing soprano, but you're still a male. I can't even believe I'm talking. My father was a pastor, and he talked about just like I'm doing, he talked about these things. I have his notes. I've told you this. And I'm sure if he's sitting there watching this today, if they get the prophecy update up there, wherever, he's like, he's just shaking his head like, yeah, he's probably laughing like, you thought you were pretty smart when you were a kid. Let's see how you handle this one. And look at what it says. To be protected under the act, peoples must be proposing to transition, to live in the opposite gender or have undergone transition. They do not have to be undergoing a medical procedure to change their sex. In fact, medical procedures have nothing to do with the protection under this act. This is what the Church of England is telling its Christian, and I really mean using the scare quotes, Christian schools. Schools must not discriminate either directly or indirectly against a pupil because of their trans status. In the context of a school, in the context of a school, indirect discrimination could include an inflexible uniform policy that creates a particular difficulty for trans pupil. Here's the translation of that. Everything you do will be wrong and subject to sanctions under these rules. And here's the point. It's like what Facebook does. It's what like YouTube does. They're trying to get you to conform to this society that they want, where morals and sex, they're just blowing everything to smithereens from a morality standpoint. I'm going to have to go home and clean my screen, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to start spitting at some point. It has practical consequences. I'm going to play you an extended interview, and we will go, since we got a little bit of a late start, we're going to go to at least 12:15 today. Like I needed to tell you that. That's prophesying around here, right? I'm going to play you part of an interview from ITV in England with a young teacher who has now been told he's likely to lose his job because he saw a couple of his students, and they both looked like girls, but one was wanting to identify as a boy, and he wanted to praise them, and he just kind of off the cuff said, "Great job, girls." Now he's going to lose his job. He's a Christian because he misgendered this one student, and he apologized immediately. And he's brought up, he hasn't taught for days. I want you to listen to this interview, and particularly the questions asked by these, the passage in 1 Corinthians where it says God, I use the phrase, God confounds the wise. The word there is moroni. I like to use the term, he morons the world because of the way they want. Listen to these people when they ask these questions. Here it is.
The particular incident happened following a student coming into my class in June. This student was just passed to me by another teacher, and there was no professional dialogue between myself, the school, but being intuitive, I thought, this particular student wanted to be called a boy, but there was nothing, no professional dialogue as I'm suggesting.
Right.
Obviously, I wanted to incorporate this student in the class, welcome her to the class, and get
him.
Well, of course, this is the issue, isn't it? We don't know. Do we?
You were calling her by her. You always called her by her name.
I was calling her by her first name.
You weren't using. You weren't using pronouns.
Not at all. I would say first name. But I wanted to.
Okay, what he's saying is because I've read a lot of stories, and so just to bring you up to speed. By the way, the lady to the right is Christian Legal Society, or whatever the organization is, Christian Legal Defense Society in England. It's sort of like our ACLJ and Alliance Defending Freedom here. She's very articulate. You'll hear her in a minute. And what he's saying is, nobody told me. Okay, I was kind of guessing, and I just made a mistake on this one occasion. But look at what the hosts do, like, and so I told her, and he goes, no, you mean him. And he goes, well, like, this is just insanity.
To incorporate her in the lesson, and I'm speaking from a place of personal conviction, saying her, so that's obviously an issue for discussion.
Do you find it difficult to say him?
It's not that it's a difficult thing for me, but I think as adults, it's something that we can talk about. And as we're referring to this, I was trying to incorporate said student into the class, and initially the student was getting the poorest scores in the class and went on to get the best score in the class in the most recent test. So I thought I was doing my job, just as you'd expect, being a maths teacher.
Well, but you addressed the class, didn't you? You said, well done, girls. That's
well, it's not an all-girls school, it's a mixed school.
Right.
But there was a few.
It was a small working group, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a small working group, and so I said this comment, a slip of the tongue. I really didn't want to sort of project anything onto the student, because obviously, teacher standards treat all students with respect.
The investigation concluded that the misgendering of a pupil and avoidance of using gendered pronouns contravenes the school's code of conduct with regard to demonstrating an awareness of sexual and cultural diversity of students, and the use of insensitive comments towards young people and the use of religious comments in maths lessons demonstrates a failure to comply with school policies. So you've sort of explained a little bit that you didn't want to cause offence and this, that and the other, and you'd rather not use the pronouns, even though that they are saying that is against school policy. What about the religious
And he almost looked like he's in tears there, Let's be sensitive.
in maths?
Well, I never try to be insensitive, with anything that I speak about. So with regards to the transgender issue, I was always just trying to uphold, as I say.
If on Wednesday everything is fine, you go back to school. I'm just intrigued to know, how you will deal with this issue again, because you said the issue lies with the fact that...
An excellent thought, I think.
Well, recognising gender fluidity conflicts sharply with your religious beliefs. It's not unreasonable to call someone a girl if they are born a girl, and that in itself could lead you straight back into the fire, because that is not the way now that we are led to believe that that's how we should be addressing children.
Well, yes, I think personally, and also under law in the country and biologically, it makes sense for us to be man and woman, and I think following on from that, our policies should be influenced by biology and law, rather than what I would say is an ideology.
But in the past, you would have
maybe extreme, Holly, your reaction.
I think so. I mean, I think
at some point everybody has to take a step forward and move forward and realise and learn from people. I learn from real people that have sat on this sofa with real issues.
Well, what we're seeing increasing cases of children in schools who have gender identity disorder, which is something that's very serious. But what we're doing in response to that is changing the whole of the school policy, rather than actually, I think the kindest and most compassionate thing for us to do as teachers and as parents is actually to take those children aside and actually work out how we can help them.
And by helping them, if that is,
how do you mean helping them? Cure them?
Well, actually, if we force everyone else to conform to their gender identity disorder, which often presents itself along with a number of other issues.
There was Paddy Maguire, who was born a boy, 3, when she started asking her parents if she could wear a dress. After hearing stories about transgender children being driven to self-harm and suicide, the mother, Lorna, gave her husband an ultimatum: you can support your daughter or you can bury your son. Children do kill themselves.
No, we actually see that the suicidality rate of children that actually do go through some kind of transition process is just as high as if they don't. So actually, all the social science reveals that.
You're a Christian.
And actually also...
You're both Christians. You're both Christians. It doesn't seem very Christian to me for you to be so intransigent.
No, listen, because actually here, for instance, the Church of England today, in their report, says that we're all made in God's image, but what it then fails to do is actually point to the next
So
part.
they're wrong as well.
No, what it fails to do is to actually say that we're born in the image of God, male and female. Actually, in a society that's confused, that's a fantastic message of hope. And I think that that's something that society is crying out for. And actually, the kindest thing that you can do for a little child that is gender confused is actually to help them to live in the body that they are. You wouldn't say to an anorexic
Have you sat down
for
and
instance,
have you met transgender parents? Have you sat down and talked to them?
Absolutely, we have. And what we're seeing is people that actually, what we're seeing, interestingly, is that whole schools now, for instance, the primary school you had, Nigel and Sally Rowe, here on this sofa just a few weeks ago, they're the ones who, in a sense, have been excluded. This is the man who's been excluded for 10 days. And actually then a whole school changing, manipulating the whole of its ideology and actually forcing all the students and punishing students that don't conform.
Because do you mind if I? Because the students don't really know how to react to. You know, it's not something that we're informing.
Shouldn't you be teaching them? Isn't that your job, to teach them how to react?
I love teaching.
Yeah.
But I'm referring to the students around,
But a role as a teacher, isn't it? It's not just the subject that you're teaching, it's their well-being.
To something that isn't a reality.
Definitely, I'm fully on
board.
Are
you saying that transgender is not a reality?
The fact that someone that they have always known as a girl decides to present herself as a boy is actually not a truth.
So in your eyes, it's not possible to be born in the wrong body?
No, we are born male and female, and we can't change that. Surgery can't change that. So, and actually, the kindest thing we can do in that situation is to help the child with the gender identity disorder and usually a number of other comorbidities, help them to live in the body that they have and not force.
If they were homosexual, would you help them not to be homosexual?
And not force all the other
Can you
children.
answer that question?
We're dealing with transgenders.
No, but I'm asking that question.
Well, very often when we see people that are children that are identifying as homosexual, very often it's not good for them to live out in such a lifestyle. It's not good for our children to be highly sexual. It's not good for our children.
According to anti-bullying rules,
I'm
finding this utterly abhorrent. According to anti-bullying rules set out by the Church of England yesterday, the instructions for the C of E's 4,700 schools said they should not require children to wear uniforms that create difficulty as trans pupils. So you're in direct conflict with your own church.
And that's because the Church of England says we're made in God's image, but then fails to say that we're made male.
So everybody's failed.
Well, this was an opportunity for the church to point to the most compassionate and beautiful person that's ever walked the earth, which is Jesus Christ.
Which is take a step forward and look around them.
Jesus Christ made it clear that we were made male and female. It's a beautiful thing.
And then he goes on to say, the host there on the left, he goes, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll be back in 2017 and not in some medieval time. This disgusts me. Okay? I pray that he gets saved, okay? But I'm allowed to say he disgusts me. He cannot think. It's Romans chapter 1 hitting you right in the face. God gives them over to a reprobate mind. And they lose the ability to reason. Do you think it's possible that somebody would be born in a body that's not the sex that they have? Or something, whatever. It doesn't even make sense. Melanie Phillips, bless her heart, The Deconstruction of Humanity, she wrote about it this week. If you want to break from the spectacle of Britain tearing itself apart over leaving the European Union, you can upset yourself instead watching the spectacle of the Western world tearing apart the very notion of what it is to be a human being. And I posted this on my Facebook wall this week. The knee-jerk bullying victim group sectarianism and repudiation of reason itself over transgenderism defy belief. The Times reports that a lesbian Labour Party women's officer was allegedly subject to months of harassment as a TERF, a derogatory term for trans exclusionary radical feminist, because she took issue with aspects of transgenderism. And the lady said, she's on the left. She's a lesbian, okay? She said, I feel quite violated. I've worked as a trade unionist for 30 years and I've never been shut down in this way. It's disgusting. I agree with her. Debate is not hate. If we can't talk about gender laws and get shut down on that, what's next? What else are we not allowed to talk about? We're going back to the days of McCarthyism. It is disgraceful. And it was this transgender teenager on the right that got her kicked out of a party that she served for 30 years. Intimidation by transgender activists in the laughable cause of promoting greater tolerance and inclusivity has suddenly become the new norm. Examples such as the Christian math teacher who was suspended for addressing as a girl a female pupil who identifies as a boy are coming thick and fast. As has been noted elsewhere, however, the really extraordinary aspect of all this is the way in which the establishment, conservative government ministers, schools, universities, the Church of England, are meekly falling into line with the hallucinatory requirement enforced by coercion, character assassination, and social ostracism against anyone who dares resist, that we deny the fact that we belong to the sex into which we were born. The reason for this existential collapse is that the relativist West has so heavily bought into the belief that reality is merely what we decide it to be. Ours has become a culture of radical subjectivity in which there is no such thing as objective truth. Everything is instead a matter of opinion and individual perception. Feelings trump facts every time. I think I've said that about 1,000 times. No one's lifestyle is to be considered wrong or inferior to anyone else's. No judgment is permitted, except for the judgment that judgmentalism is wrong. What is right for me is what is right. What I declare something to be is what it is. I feel, therefore I am. The ostensible aim of all this is to end discrimination, prejudice, and social exclusion. This is untrue. The aim is unilaterally to change the entire basis of society from one governed by external moral laws and duties to one which the only rule that has any authority is the duty to actualize our own inner potential and fulfill our own desires. People declared themselves answerable to no moral authority above themselves. Human beings would now make it all up as they went along. Since sexual procreation is the way in which a society replicates itself, in order to change the society, the rules governing sexual procreation had to be junked. Normative rules of sexual constraint, marriage, heterosexuality, and so on were all dismissed as harmful social constructs. Now human biology is also being turned into a social construct so that it will be deconstructed and reconstructed at will. Humanity itself has to become fluid. This is from the American College of Pediatrics. I referred to this earlier. This is a paper they put out in June. And this is what they said. We are concerned about the current trend to quickly diagnose and affirm young people as transgender, often settling them down a path toward medical transition. We feel that unnecessary surgeries and or hormonal treatments, they're doing hormonal treatments on 7-year-old children to stop them going through puberty. This is a crime. It's child abuse. We feel that unnecessary surgeries and our hormonal treatments, which have not been proven safe in the long term, represent significant risk for young people. Policies that encourage either directly or indirectly such medical treatments for young people who may or not be able to evaluate the risk and benefits are highly suspect in our opinion. Advocates of transgenderism and the surgeries and stuff on the other side, what do they say? Got to do what they feel. This moron on TV says, well, they'll go kill themselves. The data, the scientific data shows that when they do the surgery, the sex reassignment surgery, they're 22 times more likely to commit suicide. Who's abusing who in this case? Who's lost touch with reality? They're denying the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God. That's what this is all about. This is a war, people, and it's going to continue until the Lord returns. To be clear, twin studies alone establish that the alternative perspective of an innate gender identity arising from prenatally feminized or masculinized brains trapped in the wrong body is in fact an ideological belief that has no basis in rigorous science. That's what the American College of Pediatrics said. Rigorous science, how quaint that sounds in our ideologically fluid world. that too is being washed away as we steadily dismantle not just the foundations of Western culture, not just morality, not even just the primacy of reason, but our very understanding of what makes us what we are. And Romans 1 deals with it. Listen, I appreciate Melanie Phillips. I pray for her salvation. She said more in that article than a lot of pulpits in America will cover in a decade about what's going on. It's a Ramirez cartoon, Weapons of Mass Deception, all the stuff going on in, and listen, I want to show you how some of this works. This week in Washington, the Museum of the Bible opened. It's done by the Green family, who owns Hobby Lobby. This is an article from, I can't remember where I read it. I think this is from the Washington Post or the New York Times. I think it's from the Washington Post. Talking about this privately funded Bible museum. So what do they say? Separation of church and state. Now what's the problem? They put it in the middle of Washington, D.C. It might persuade somebody that the Bible is true. Oh my goodness, it's a crisis. The world is coming to an end. The world is coming to an end, but in a after fashion. But not because of this, because of the last story and the next one that's coming up. That did nothing to reassure those who worried that a privately funded $500 million Bible museum only 3 blocks from Capitol Hill would seek to press conservative evangelicals' already huge influence unduly. Nor did the institution's original mission statement, which was to inspire confidence in the absolute authority of the Bible. And in the Washington Post this morning, on their editorial pages, they have a couple book reviews. One is a book review called Bible Nation, the United States of Hobby Lobby. Now remember the Hobby Lobby case. They didn't want certain aspects of Obamacare to go into effect because it was against our religious beliefs. And guess what? They went to the Supreme Court and they won. Horrors of horrors. Through interviews, and this, so there's a blog post on Patheos about this. Okay, so it says, through interviews with the Greens and their associates, a person who wrote a book called The Unfundamentalist. Okay, so what do you think his orientation is with respect to Christianity? Tear that thing down, right? Though through interviews with the Greens and their associates, it seems that the Green family means well. Theirs is a naive and simplistic faith in which the Bible is a source of unmitigated good. The book itself is blameless and is responsible for many of the cultural values we hold dear. That's on page 129 of that book. More often than not, the shortcoming, and there are many in their various Bible-related projects, can be chalked up to well-intentioned self-deception and large-scale naivete. Though Moss and Baden, this is from the Washington Post article, take pains throughout the book to objectively explore all sides of these stories and generally withhold judgment. Generally withhold judgment? You said that the self-deception and large-scale naivete, and you're not making a judgment? The Washington Post can't even reason. Would somebody call Jeff Bezos and tell him, hire somebody that can think? I'm available, okay? They conclude that the Greens have, and this is a quote, ended up misleading their constituents and stakeholders at virtually every level. They have promoted a Protestant Bible curriculum in the guise of secular education. They have created a museum that speaks the language of religious pluralism, but in fact rehearses the standard Protestant story of the Bible. They have taken advantage of the undergraduate and graduate students having the promise, offering the promise of important scholarly work, but often the only benefit for the students has been a bolstering of their own faith commitments without any professional advancement or formation. In other words, they study the Bible and what happens? They become stronger Christians. And to this guy, this is a massive tragedy and a deception that's going on. He is a graduate, he has a PhD in some secular humanist institution, seminary that we call the university. They have misled the evangelical community by suggesting the potential for amazing new discoveries, remarkably early biblical texts, only to redact those claims or burying those artifacts out of sight. He goes on, and this article concludes, he concludes, This offering, this museum, if you will, is no mere gesture of religious goodwill. It was a potent symbol of evangelical leaders' ignoble bargain with a biblically illiterate sociopath. Oh, this is another art. This is an article somewhere about Roy Moore, I think. Anyway. Oh, I know what it was. In the beginning of the Washington Post article, they tell a story where Paula White took a page from the original 1611 King James and presented it to Donald Trump as a gift. Now, I'm not defending Paula White. Don't get that. But this is how the Washington Post described what she did. This offering, if you will, was no mere gesture of religious goodwill. It was a potent symbol of evangelical leaders' ignoble bargain with a biblically illiterate sociopath. In case you don't know who that is, that's Donald Trump, who, despite daily exhibitions of all manner of indecency, has been molded into their greatest champions in the culture wars. Do you think this person ever said this about Ted Kennedy? Why those culture wars have retained their resiliency in the face of rising secularism and the rise of Trump is a complex and often superficially examined question. Yeah, you don't know what's... But a new book about the Museum of the Bible and the family behind it provides an essential, unsettling, and often shocking account how the museum, which opened near the mall on Friday, came into existence and how its founders' money and political power are reshaping politics, law, and even the academy. You want to see somebody who's reshaping law, politics, and the academy with money? Go look for George Soros. Go look at the Democratic 3-day thing that they had this weekend, the secretive thing about how to reshape democracy or whatever it was. A secret meeting. Okay, Phileena Hertz. This is why we need the Museum of the Bible, or people who are committed to the truth of Scripture. She's very popular evangelical, quote, evangelical mystic, although she identifies herself as Catholic. I've played you the videos of her. She speaks at evangelical schools like Taylor and Biola and their chapels. Leads them in contemplative prayer. She has a thing called contemplative social action through contemplative or something like that. Okay? She's a fan of Richard Rohr. This is what Richard Rohr said in one of these articles. Richard Rohr, Franciscan friar and prolific author who runs the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, was surprised when his publisher told him that his books on Christian contemplation and the power of liturgy are most popular with young evangelical men who see a direct connection between changing worship and changing politics. So many of the millennial evangelicals I work with, they're so disillusioned with their good parents' inability to deal with racism, sexism, and homophobia, the issues tearing our country apart, he told me. And this gal loves Richard Rohr. Excuse me 1 second, I have to back out of this. What's she into? Well, here's one thing. Look at what she calls herself. Author, spiritual director, contemplative retreat guide. This is her Twitter page. Public speaker, yoga instructor, founding partner in the Gravity Center with her husband. She spoke at Andy Stanley's Catalyst Retreat a few years back. And at that, I've told you this, they gave out a thing called the Enneagram, a coupon to do the Enneagram Institute self-evaluation thing, which is clearly rank pagan New Age stuff. The Enneagram Institute admits it on their website, or at least they used to. Her husband, this is his hashtag, Sacred Enneagram. So she comes to Andy Stanley, does the contemplative prayer thing. They give out the Enneagram coupon. Do you think there's maybe a connection that they were just bringing the family business into Catalyst? One of the people who retweeted, or you see on here, I can't read, it's something about The future isn't already known, fully known by God. We're co-creators with God of the future. Does that sound evangelical? Shauna Nyquist said this: highly recommended reading great books for my friends, Philemon, John Huckins, etc. And you see her book down there, Pilgrimage of the Soul by Philemon Hurwitz. Well, who's Shauna Nyquist? What's that got to do with anything? Her father and mother are Bill and Lynn Hybels from Willow Creek Church. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. In the New York Times this morning, How to Escape Roy Moore's Evangelicalism is one of the major editorials on the front page of the Sunday Review section of the New York Times. I won't go into, yeah, if you can dig up Dennis Prager's shows from earlier in the week, he talked about this quite a bit, and I think his thoughts were pretty good. I mean, can somebody who ever, even if it's true, if somebody did something immoral 30 years ago, could they do moral things now? This is a life, because I don't want to say anything, because if I dismiss it, then everybody will be on my case that I don't believe the women. But look, I've investigated these things, and people don't always tell the truth. You may find that shocking. I've been a trial lawyer. I've taken thousands of depositions. I've had people give very credible depositions, walk out of the deposition and tell me, boy, I got away with it on that one because I was lying the whole time. I've had this happen. So people do lie. So this is a list of settlements paid out by Congress over the years for harassment and other settlements. This is just Congress. The Senate has not released their information. Somebody noted, well, from 2007, that's pretty high settlements, and Ted Kennedy died in 2009, and the numbers went down. So, this is from the Washington Post this morning. For some evangelicals, a choice between more and morality. And then another article, How Donald Trump's Presidency is Warping American Christianity by the socialist Marxist Jim Wallis of Sojourners. This is happening. U.S. to consider special counsel on the uranium deal. Let's hope. There's a lot of, well, I tell you what, everybody with a YouTube channel is running a lot of speculation out there. Don't get ahead of the facts, folks. If it happens, it'll happen. But, saw somebody sent me something about 3,000 Marines were put in place at Langley this morning because they're stopping a coup against Donald Trump. Folks, this is just, please, just stop it. Now, we're going to talk about AI for a few minutes. Deep security breach cripples NSA. Mysterious group steals powerful hacking weapons, putting world in danger. Monday, New York Times, front page, above the fold, main article. This is the concern that I have with all this artificial intelligence. Who's going to control it? What if it falls into the wrong hands? Do you think it could fall into the wrong hands? The National Security Administration of the United States lost a bunch of their cyber hacking tools. They don't even know where they went. The National Security Administration. I'm concerned that this artificial intelligence and I think this plays into end times thing. This is the cover of Wired magazine, just came out, Love in the Time of Robots. And they have these articles, but then in Wired on their website this week is this article, Inside the First Church of Artificial Intelligence. Okay? And this new church has been formed and filed papers with the IRS, and it's a 501c3. You can give tax-deductible contributions to it. It's called WOTF, Way of the Future. We'll focus on the realization, acceptance, and worship of a Godhead based on artificial intelligence, developed through computer hardware and software. That includes funding research to help create the divine AI itself. The religion will seek to build working relationships with AI industry leaders and create a membership through community outreach, initially targeting AI professionals and laypersons who are interested in the worship of a Godhead based on AI. The following filings also say that the church plans to conduct workshops and educational programs throughout the San Francisco Bay Area beginning this year. What is going on? This guy named Lewandowski, he was with Uber. What is going on to be created will effectively be a God. It's not a God in the sense that it makes lightning or causes hurricanes, but if there is something a billion times smarter than the smartest human, what else are you going to call it? You will be able to talk to God literally and know that it's listening. The church is how we spread the word, the gospel. If you believe in it, start a conversation with someone else and help them understand the same things. Lewandowski believes that a change is coming, a change that will transform every aspect of human existence, disrupting employment, leisure, religion, the economy, and possibly decide our very survival as a species. It does seem to set it up for a one world leader that will know how to use this and say the right things. Lewandowski prefers a softer word, the transition. Humans are in charge of the planet because we are smarter than the other animals and are able to build tools and apply rules. In the future, if something is much, much smarter, there's going to be a transition as to who is actually in charge. What we want is the peaceful, serene transition of control of the planet from humans to whatever, and to ensure that the whatever knows who helped it get along. The internet is the nervous system. Lewandowski says, I personally think it will happen sooner than people expect. And this week there's this video out there about people concerned about drones. Here's just a bit of it. You can look up the whole thing. Just a couple minutes of this.
Customer pilots directed almost 3,000 precision strikes last year. We're super proud of it. It allows you to separate the bad guys from the good. It's a big deal. But we have something much bigger. Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. It's flying itself. Its processor can react 100 times faster than a human. The stochastic motion is an anti-sniper feature. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition. Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. Did you see that? That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. They used to say guns don't kill people, people do. Well, people don't. They get emotional, disobey orders, aim high. Let's watch the weapons make the decisions.
So they use an example of some people in a parking garage and they start running. It's to get people thinking about where this can go. And what he used is, you can go down, I was looking at them the other day. These drones with 4K cameras and all this stuff that you can pick up at, I mean, they weigh like 12 ounces at Best Buy. I was looking at one the other, I'm not thinking about buying one, Pam, but I just was looking at it just for research purposes. And, you know, they're like $500 and you can fly them. You can use your phone to fly them around. And DJI has great apps and stuff, but they show how they do like a news report, and they've gotten these students who they've identified through their posts on social media and stuff, and they send a swarm of these locust-like things, that sounds like Revelation, out to wipe out. And they said in last report there were 8,382 students dead at this university because they weren't thinking the right way. You think it can happen? Now, I don't like this guy, Emmanuel Macron, the dictator of France. And he gave an interview this week with Time. In December, if they accept the invitation of the president of France, leaders of 100 countries will descend on Paris to ramp up the global fight against climate change. But in a striking omission, one major name is not on the list: Donald Trump. The club, of course, comprises every other country on the planet now that even Syria has pledged to join the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, which was negotiated in the French capital in 2015 to drastically rein in carbon emissions and stave off disastrous global warming. Climate change is the most global of all the world's problems, but is hardly the only one. There are nuclear threats, far-right nationalism, jihadi terrorism, and technological disruption. For all those two, the French president is eager to discuss what his country can offer. And although he says he's not seeking to become the leader of the free world, he can sound like he is. Today, de facto, we are part of the global leadership on climate change. He said, I want to be part of the global leadership on the economy and on finance and the digital environment. I think we have a very important leadership to play on multilateralism. Here's part of his interview. Listen to some of what he says here.
Leader of Europe. It doesn't make sense. I want to be one of these leaders and this new generation of leaders, totally convinced that our future is a European future.
This is when he was elected back earlier this year. And then, by the way, that's not the French national anthem they're playing, that's the European national anthem, the European anthem. Remember the symbology that was involved in this? Watch what happens when he takes the stage and he stands there in front of this glass pyramid outside the Louvre. And he goes on in his interview.
won in France against Marine Le Pen on a very clear basis and a very clear dialogue, which is the opposition between open and closed, European and nationalistic. I mean, it was a very clear discussion, a very clear deal. The whole story of Europe is about a series of wars trying to dominate the others. What we managed to build right after the Second World War is unique. Having 70 years of peace, which is brand new, it never existed in Europe. And I'm very attached to this principle because our values, our collective preferences are European. You have a strong attachment in the US to freedom, but with less attachment to equality than in Europe. You have a very strong attachment to market economy in China, but absolutely not the same relationship with freedom. This mix of capital markets, progress, equality and liberty is the DNA of Europe.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
I think I do respect President Trump's decision not to follow up on Paris Agreement. And I made it very clear from the very beginning that there is no renegotiation of of the Paris Agreement, because he cannot renegotiate with more than 180 or 90 countries. It doesn't fly. And when you look at the situation in the US today, even if President Trump decided not to confirm his predecessor's commitment, when you look at the commitments made by big cities, states, and private sectors, I do believe that we can match the initial US commitment. So my perspective with President Trump indeed is to say, you are a great partner of France, we are friends, you should revisit your decision and decide a new leadership for the US and for the planet to go further.
I guess his wife maybe told him to say that. Here's what he said a few months ago.
I call on you to remain confident. We will succeed. Because we are fully committed. Because wherever we live, whoever we are, we all share the same responsibility. Make our planet great again.
And this is the symbology. There's the pyramid at the Louvre with a little light above his head. This had to be a setup. This is not by accident. But here's what they're not. Okay, so he was a Rothschild banker. We all know this. He came out of nowhere. And so here's the Rothschild publication this week, The Economist. What they don't tell you about climate change. Okay, so everybody, this Donald Trump, he's out there all by himself. In America, they're stupid. But here's the truth. Don't be so positive. Fully 101 of the 116 models the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change uses to chart what lies ahead assume that carbon will be taken out of the air in order to have a good chance of meeting the 2-degree centigrade target. Last sentence in that paragraph, putting in place carbon removal schemes of this magnitude would be an epic endeavor, even if tried and tested techniques existed. They do not. A few power stations might do it, but as it says at the end, such schemes merely lower emissions. They do not reverse them. Whether any of these technologies can do the job in time is unknown. All of them are very expensive, as none is proven at scale. Persuading the Earth's swelling population to plant an India's worth of new trees or crops to produce energy as the climate simulations require looks highly improbable. But guess what? We have Emmanuel Macron to lead us. Do you understand the prophetic implications of this? I'm not putting the mark on him. I'm just saying this is unprecedented. This is why I titled it, You Need to Listen to This. Or you need to, whatever it was, you need to know this. I don't remember my own title. It's because I made it up 5 minutes ago. Massive earthquake in Iran this week. I'll just do a few little bit on the Middle East, which deserves its own time. The quake is a divine test, the Ayatollah said. My question was, maybe the Mahdi was trying to get out of that well he fell into. In Zimbabwe, 4-decade grip of Mugabe looks like it's over. In Egypt, there's a conflict going on between Egypt and Ethiopia, and Sudan and Ethiopia. Why? Because Ethiopia is building this giant dam on the Nile River. And 90 million Egyptians, their life depends on the Nile. And if it's shut down, it's a problem. There's no place else to go. If you look everywhere else around Egypt, it's what? Desert. One of the most harsh deserts on the planet. And Egypt is tied up in this Saudi coalition against Iran. And now you have Sudan and Ethiopia. I mean, this is Egypt and Cush and Put and other people mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Prince Charles was reported this week back in 1986. He wrote a letter that said, well, you know, these Jews, boy, you know, now I've been to the Middle East, I can understand why these Jews are a problem. And every time I see Charles do something like this, I want to shout this: long live the Queen. They think they celebrated their 70th anniversary this week. I think she's 94. So we had this Cold War in the Middle East between Saudi and Iran. We have the Prince of Saudi Arabia coming in. They're in conflict in Yemen, which controls the sea lanes of the Red Sea. They're in conflict in Syria. They're building forces on the border. This is a huge problem. This is an interesting little cartoon in one of the newspapers this week about what's going on. Iran is building permanent military bases in Syria. That's what's claimed by Israel. This is what it looked like in January 2017 to the south of Damascus. If you go to Quneitra, crossing overlook there in the Golan, you're within 15 miles or so of this base that Iran is building on the mountains of northern Israel. This sounds very prophetic. The mountainous region. That's with January 2017. That was May 2017. It appears that they get HGTV and Fixer Upper in Tehran, and they've been building things, and this is what it looks like today. A lot of new buildings have been renovated. There's these troops, and so the border of Israel, you see the Golan Heights there on the left. The gray area to the right there in Syria, that's still controlled by ISIS, right on the border of Jordan and Israel. Other places, the light brown areas are sort of places where the Syrian rebels, some of them a mix of different ideologies, some Al-Qaeda and not, have some control. The dark brown areas are where Al-Qaeda still has control. The Assad, Iran, Russia control is sort of the light purple areas. And they've made exclusionary zones, but there's airstrikes going on even in the exclusionary zones. I've seen articles about that today. This is what Institute for Study of War said this. The key takeaway on this report: the de-escalation zone in Syria brokered by the U.S., Russia, and Jordan threatens the strategic interests of the U.S. and its allies. The deal fails to constrain Iran and Al-Qaeda despite the decreased violence in the southwest Syria. Iran continues to consolidate its presence along the Golan Heights through a network of proxy forces while retaining significant positions in southern Syria. Russia remains both unwilling and unable to prevent Iran from establishing a permanent foothold in the south, contrary to what Putin has said. The failure to prevent Iran's entrenchment threatens Israel, increasing the likelihood of further Israeli military intervention. Al-Qaeda, meanwhile, has leveraged the ceasefire and diminishing support to non-jihadist opposition groups to deepen its presence along the Syrian-Jordan border. That sounds like the makings of a war. Israel, this was in foreign policy, I don't have time to go into it, that Israel is growing increasingly concerned about what the Trump administration is doing. Caroline Glick wrote a big article about that Friday. There's supposed to be a peace plan that's coming out, and her concern, my concern too, is what was said in the New York Times. She said this in the conclusion of her article: Bannon and the anti-Israel establishment. And she was contrasting Steve Bannon, who spoke at the Zionist Organization of America. He gave a great speech about being pro-Israel. The Zionist Organization of America is a very pro-Israel group. And Bret Stephens, who used to be a guy at the he's lost his mind. He works at the New York Times now. He wrote an article about how Steve Bannon is anti-Jewish, anti-Semite, and nobody should ever have anything to do with him. And the head of the ZOA, I heard him interviewed on Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy, Secure Freedom Radio the other day, and he said, I researched everything that Steve Bannon, Bret Stephens has lost his mind, he said. And there's a lot of people losing their mind. If we are to believe the Times story, Caroline says, and heed the signals that Netanyahu has sent, Kushner and Greenblatt have surrendered the establishment, our old State Department, and are poised to conclude a peace plan that will be substantively identical to those of the past 3 administrations. And as a consequence, it will fail just as badly as the policies of the past 3. Bannon is right that pro-Israel forces should fight to diminish the power of the Washington foreign policy establishment, first and foremost the State Department, to empty the term pro-Israel of substance. The question is whether the fight needs to be directed at the White House or whether Trump's team of outsiders is willing and able to stand up to the establishment and adopt a policy not based on hostility towards Israel and support for Palestinian terrorists and therefore not guaranteed to fail. And so there's these troops, troops going in, they want to set up new settlements. They've deployed their anti-missile batteries. They want to do things in Jerusalem. Hezbollah has issued a report that they're on the verge of war. I'm just about finished. Israel, the foreign minister of the Soviet Union, Lavrov, said the Iranian presence there is legitimate. This is like, I mean, like just these statements here, these are like 3 whole long, hour-long teachings that could be done on these. Go read Ezekiel 38 and 39. Make it part of your daily routine so you understand what's going on. And Israel said, look, we're not going to allow this to be established on our border. We are not bound by this agreement. Israel will look after its own interests and maintain its own red lines. Because you see what happened was this week, there was an agreement, a memorandum of principles. I might have mentioned it last Sunday. Jordan, Russia, and the United States entered into this agreement. It's, boy. And then you have all this thing that's going on in Saudi Arabia. I've heard stories that the people that have been arrested are being tortured, and they want to extract hundreds of billions of dollars from these people that have been arrested, and they're going to use it. And I don't for a minute. We know that there's this massive rivalry between Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran, and it's for control of the world. And listen, while there are a lot of good people in Iran, and my understanding is there's a bit of a revival going on there, but you need to understand that the people in charge believe that if they start Armageddon, everything will happen, and the Mahdi will come, and the end times will come, and they can cause it to happen. And that's what you should remember. So this is very, very fluid. And then we have Hariri going back to Lebanon to clarify what he's doing. He's meeting with Macron this morning in Paris. So, wow, what a crazy time to be alive. So, let's pray and let's go. Father, again, thank you, Lord. I pray that you will help us to have the peace that passes understanding, to come to children of God who've accepted the finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins and our adoption into your family. But it is a troubling world on so many levels. Keep us calm. Help us to be prepared for these times, mentally, physically, spiritually. Like Joseph, who heeded the warning of a time of trouble coming and made preparations. Because I don't think he knew how bad it was going to be, but he believed the warning that he got, that things needed to be done. Give us wisdom, guide us, bless our fellowship here, watch over us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.